what you notice is that stress comes and goes in most of our lives. We all encounter stress in various ways and periods in our life. Some of them relate to life events, for instance, birth, death, marriage, shifting house, loss of a relationship. These are all natural stresses that occur, and we will react to them based on how we were set up in childhood to cope with stress, some genetic factors, some behavioural belief factors, and how we've learnt and developed and have brought on what we call emotional intelligence to face challenges and reframe or frame those things in the context of our wider life. Now, one of the things is that you need to notice is stress is actually part of life. It's healthy. So what stress in its healthy aspect is designed to do is to get us to rise in our work rate or our productivity or the levels of energy in which we actually perform tasks and meet the challenge and deal with the issue at hand, the challenge, the milestone, the deadline, and reach that goal, whatever it happens to be. So that's productive, healthy stress. And so we all can think of situations where we've had to rise to the challenge. But the problem is that stress really is designed to be burst mode in human beings. There should be, optimally with humans, a natural sort of resting state at which we perform at. And then there's little spikes where we need to come into productive or healthy stress that help us meet those challenges, deadlines, or whatever they are. The problem is that some people find that over time they are not regressing back to a resting level of normal function, and that the spike is becoming the new norm. So what happens is that stress starts to become normalised within the life of the person, and they find that they're not actually getting any respite from the stress. That's a definition, in one way, of unhealthy stress. When stress is actually more the experience than less the experience in your life, then you're trending towards unhealthy stress as being a problem within your life. Now, FIFO workers can typically encounter this. If you think of a person who's come from some other background, let's say a mechanic, a diesel fitter, might have worked in Perth in some large-scale industrial refitting workshop. You know, one of the big manufacturers, the big suppliers. So he might have worked in Welshpool, Kewdale, had a 9-to-5 job, worked in a workshop setting, came and went. That was his career. Might have been his apprenticeship or her apprenticeship. So they were in and around their normal setting of how they lived. So work wasn't too far away. They went home every night. They had relationships, they had family, they had support. Then they go on to a FIFO lifestyle. So suddenly now, the context in which they carry out their job has totally changed. So now they're on a plane, they're now in a camp or a isolated work environment situation for perhaps up to 4 weeks at a time. They're now maybe working 12 hours. They're in a foreign environment with conditions that can be harsh, typically in Western Australia at least. A lot of the mining instances are in extreme climates, whether that be heat in summer, cold in winter, which with perhaps extreme weather events occurring from time to time, such as cyclones, bushfires. So suddenly it's a different proposition for the person's brain to engage with that environment and do what all brains do, and that is safety seeking. We have within us, each one of us, as human beings, as part of the human condition, a moment-to-moment checking in by the brain, which is called safety seeking, where what we actually do is we go, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Now, safety is a perception. So a lot of that gets satisfied when we're in familiar environments. Hence, human beings can be quite habitual creatures. But when we put ourselves outside our comfort zone and put ourselves into new environments with new people, new challenges, new ways of working, the stress in us will naturally go up. because what we're trying to do is adapt and cope and then normalise that new environment so that it becomes the new norm and that we find our balance within it. The only problem is that FIFO work styles have within their nature ability to degrade a person's resources. And we've heard some of those issues and challenges all through this morning, particularly from Raylan, when we hear about things like sleep deprivation, sleeping in dongas, where perhaps you're in a work camp setting and maybe you share a camp, maybe you do or you don't have your own donga, or maybe it's a hot donga, where basically you use it while you're there and then it's used by someone else when you're not there. Or perhaps the social interactions at night in a wet or dry mess are with people you would not normally associate with, or there's cultural issues, there's potentially work cultural issues, or there may even be certain types of negative behaviours such as bullying or isolation or ostracisation based on any number of factors. There may also just be loneliness for the people, the objects and the environments which you enjoy back at home, and you miss those things. Many things can create stress, but certainly the FIFO lifestyle is one that can certainly bring on a form of stress just because the inherent nature of its remote disligation from many of the things that are in a typical FIFO worker's lifestyle. Now, some people who go into FIFO work lifestyles may also have some pre-existing conditions, issues, or the colloquial term would be baggage, that may also come into bear when they go and work in these environments. So for instance, if someone has some trauma that's unresolved, if someone has some addictions that are pre-existing, if someone has some unintegrated parts of their emotional self, such as a poor relationship to their anger or an inability to socialise with other people, they bring that into a work environment such as FIFO, where the extreme conditions and the stresses are more likely to activate those parts of the self under pressure. So we know that stress can bring on many other types of secondary behaviours. If you think of stress as the primary issue, then some of the behaviours that stress can lead to then become secondary issues, but they in turn can lead to a whole new set of consequences. They can lead to dismissals, they can lead to written warnings, they can lead to an increase in an addiction such as drinking on site, drinking off site, addictions, gambling, pornography at night in the donga, all sorts of things. People with trauma can go into trauma as a result of sleep deprivation or being triggered by the dynamics in a work camp or in an office. People who have some other issues to do with socialisation may find that they don't have many friends, which means they feel alone, they feel unwanted, they feel unloved, they feel abandoned, and they may drop into a depression or some other condition as a result of those feelings. So the FIFO environment is just one of those types of environments that can bring on certain issues because of the nature of what it represents. Now, what we do know is that if you stay in stress long enough, then you're more likely to go into anxiety as a result. If you like to think of anxiety, it's a fear. All anxiety is based on fear, and it's an imagined or a real fear that the brain will typically, through its hyper-aroused state from stress, which brings on hyperarousal, then a person will start to, through their hypervigilance, start to have either imagined or real fears. And so what can happen then is that the anxiety part of the brain, the anxiety that kicks in as a result of being stressed, will seek to find an object or a home for its anxiety. So it will find something to obsess about. It'll find something to be anxious about. There's some lines of thought that say that anxiety is a person who anticipates the future and has a fear of the future, whereas depression is someone who reflects on the past and has feelings about the past. I don't think that's strictly true, because I know in many cases people can anticipate the future and feel depressed because they see a hopelessness in their situation. I also know other people who have done things in their past and are anxious about the fact that that past may catch up with them. So I don't think it's such a black and white formula.